So Bob Ryan is coming here. There's kind of a cavalcade of Around the Horn panelists coming here. Who would you like next? Frank Isola? Woody Page. I know you want Woody Page. I hope everybody's doing fine today. I know it's been just over 2 weeks since the game. I know you're not feeling good about that, but if it's any solace, one of my best friends, who happens to cover the White House for USA Today, went to South Carolina. And he is still nauseous when the idea of Clemson winning a national championship enters his mind. So I guess that's kind of like how you felt when Auburn won. Am I allowed to say that here, Auburn? I don't have a PowerPoint, but I just put up a picture of my only true hero from athletics. Anybody know who that is? It's Paul Robeson. I encourage you to read Paul Robeson's story. Everything he did, he was nonpareil at. All-American football team, 1917, 1918, Rutgers, first black player there. At the time, he was considered the best football player that football had ever seen. Went on to become a professional football player, got his law degree at Columbia, became an actor, became a singer, became a civil rights, human rights spokesperson, who then was chased out of this country by McCarthyism in the 1950s. Lived abroad, lived overseas. In fact, I think if you go to Berlin right now, you can go to the University of Berlin, and there's an entire center dedicated to Paul Robeson. And then the other person's picture I just pulled up, and I mentioned this earlier if you were here earlier. Angela Davis, happy birthday to one of Alabama's finest, born 73 years ago today in Birmingham, in all places, Dynamite Hill, which came to define Birmingham and Alabama and really change the course of history, I think, in the southern United States. Atlanta is Atlanta because Birmingham was Birmingham, and it very well could have gone the other way. So, just a little bit more about me, though I hate talking about me, but it kind of dovetails into what I'm going to talk about today. I started out as a journalist dedicated to investigating and writing about issues revolving around racial and other social issues in our society. But along the way, I turned into a journalist reporting on and opining about sports. And then I morphed into the TV talking head and disembodied radio voice chatting about sports even more. And most recently, as Andy pointed out, I've become a visiting professor of journalism, sports journalism to be specific, at the University of Maryland. And all of this has taken me back to my original interest in being a journalist, with all the research tools available to me in academia, as well as my bag of investigative tools from being a trained veteran journalist. And if there's one thing I've learned in recent years, of which I am absolutely sure, it is that the black male athlete headed to college is about to be hoodwinked. Now, why do I say that? Well, let me share with you some numbers from updated research done by University of Pennsylvania professor Sean Harper and two of his doctoral candidates to better illustrate the trick bag into which black athletes have cast their immediate future. During the 2014-2015 academic calendar, black men were 2.5% of all undergraduate students. But they were 56.3% of football teams and 60.8% of men's basketball teams, the two revenue-generating sports that one economist estimated is now as big as $13 billion. Here at Alabama, black men in 2014 to 2015 were 4.1% of all undergraduates and 70.6% of the football and men's basketball teams, that led the way to generating $148.9 million in revenue for the athletic department and the university. In other words, the overwhelming reason black males were students on a college campus was not to be part of the educatee class, but to be part of the working class, the under-remunerated working class called college athlete. Indeed, only 53.6% of black male athletes graduated within 6 years, an academic success rate that paled in comparison to everyone else. Like 68.5% of all athletes who graduated within 6 years, 75.4% of all undergraduates, and 58.4% of those few black undergraduate men who were not athletes. It didn't really matter what college or university they chose either. Only the University of Miami and my alma mater, Northwestern University, graduated black athletes at a rate higher than or equal to the rest of the college body. 2/3 of the universities graduated black male athletes at rates lower than black undergraduate men who were not paying their way through college with blood and sweat. Here at Alabama, black athletes graduated at a 63% clip, while all athletes graduated at a 71% rate, and all students had a graduation rate of 66%. Only Northwestern graduated black male student athletes at a rate higher than or equal to all students on campus. Indeed, the black athletes' education in college is not a priority for just about any college they choose. Those are indeed sweet nothings coaches vying for signatures on letters of intent whisper in their ears. But they don't have to give in to seduction. If colleges can supply the NFL and NBA with black ready-made players, they can do the same for our sciences, our school systems, our governments, our professions, with black ready-made intellectual, professional, and vocational talent. If they ever recruit and train black males in the arts and sciences like they do in football and basketball, they can point to more MacArthur Award winners, just like they do All-Americas and national champions. But athletes shouldn't wait for altruism. Those numbers aren't all on the colleges and universities they might choose and the coaches for whom they decide to play. They don't have to do themselves and their families a disservice. They can exercise self-determination and play the system rather than let it play them. They have political and economic weight to move the universities that want them to produce revenue and championships. You may have heard those of us in the media praise a former North Carolina basketball star by the name of Rashad McCants. He was the second leading scorer on the Tar Heels 2005 national championship team. And we praised him for being a historic whistleblower for telling one of my employers, ESPN, a few years ago, that tutors wrote his term papers, that he rarely went to class for about half his time in North Carolina, that he remained able to play largely because he took bogus classes designed to keep athletes academically eligible. McCants revealed that he could have been academically ineligible to play during the championship season had he not been provided all that assistance. He said head coach, basketball coach Roy Williams, who I know and like, knew about the paper class system at Chapel Hill. The so-called paper classes didn't require students to go to class. Instead, papers were required to submit only one term paper to receive a grade. McCants also told ESPN that he even made the dean's list in the spring of 2005, despite not attending any of his 4 classes for which he received straight A grades. He said advisors and tutors who worked with the basketball program steered him to take the paper classes in the African American Studies program. Now, everything McCants said mirrored an investigative report in 2011 by the Raleigh News and Observer about widespread academic fraud at North Carolina, centered on the African American Studies classes and the many black athletes who took it in order to remain eligible. The newspaper reported that that basketball players on the national championship team accounted for 15 enrollments in the classes. The university internal investigation found that 54 classes in the Department of African American Studies were either aberrant or irregularly taught for 5 years. How problematic was this to the people who lord over college sports? The NCAA penalized the football program for improper benefits and academic misconduct involving a tutor, but it left the athletic department's sports programs largely unscathed by the academic scandal. In other words, let me say it again. The education of black athletes in college is not a priority for just about any college they choose. You think I'm exaggerating? Then go to a library or order on some ebook application a book titled Unsportsmanlike Conduct Exploiting College Athletes. You know who wrote it? A guy named Walter Byers. You know who Walter Byers was? He was the architect of the modern day NCAA. He lorded over the NCAA for 36 years until he retired in 1987. His book lays out how the multi-billion-dollar college sports complex was built by playing college football and basketball players, black athletes in particular, as chumps. Feed them, run them, make cheddar off of them, then bring in the next trial. Oh, and call them student athletes. So it sounds like they're getting something invaluable in return, and they won't sue for workers' compensation, long-term health benefits, or a paycheck like everyone else who puts in a 40-hour work week on campus. As a longtime addicted fan to college sports, as well as a longtime sports writer who has railed about fraudulent academics at Bowie Athletics, I wasn't surprised by McCants' revelations. Sham courses and fake passing grades, we've heard it all before. But now that I'm also a college professor, my criticism is conflicted. I've learned that athletes expect and get special treatment. The few times I've had athletes in my classes at the University of Maryland, if it is their season, they present me with a letter from the athletic department. It says they'll be unavailable for class on this date and that date as they perform their athletic duties for the school. I'm asked to sign the agreement, and I do. And then I think, if any other student told me they couldn't make all my classes because they had other stuff to do, then I'd tell them, go find another class. But I've developed a personal commitment to fairness to all students, to help them learn rather than thwart them to learn. In other words, I want their education to be priority, even if they are athletes. But this makes for some frank discussions and thoughts about race, masculinity, education, and sports. So while I've come to believe that the missions of higher education and that of the multi-billion-dollar college sports complex are so wholly incompatible that the marriage breeds still shady practices when it comes to taking advantage of athletes, most of whom are black males, those athletes cannot allow themselves, as long as this unethical, if not immoral system exists, to be treated and eventually dismissed as a piece of chattel, which is essentially what McCants did, and probably most of the overwhelming number of black athletes who play sports in college and departed with nothing to show for it other than proof that they were at one time ballers. It long has been time for black athletes to hold colleges, particularly on the academic and administrative sides, accountable, as Missouri football players did a couple seasons ago. It is time for them to demand that education be prioritized for them. It is time for them to make the image and reputation of college and university sports teams tied as much to their status as students as the conference championships and bowl and tournament berths they bring them. In other words, the McCants among black athletes are often culpable in their lack of education due to bad choices. Even if those allegations are true and they are offered special treatment, getting in sham classes, getting A's they weren't earned, having other people do classroom work for them, allowing teachers not to require them to show up in class, they are willfully participating in their own dumbing down, living down to the stereotype of the dumb black athlete, which is much dumber than the stereotype of the dumb jock. McCants didn't squander a free education. There's nothing free about practicing and playing sports for upwards of 40 hours per week in a season in exchange for not having to pay hard cash for college classes, room, and board. Anytime you hear someone say college scholarship an athlete gets is free education, you tell them that's fake news. What McCants did squander was an opportunity for a college education, an opportunity to better himself, his family, black people's lives in general. He lasted just 5 seasons in the NBA. As a professor, I don't make my students do anything. My syllabus outlines my guidelines and expectations. My students either do the work or they don't. They get out of class what they put into it. If they don't come to class, read, study, or do the assignments, they won't learn a damn thing. And that'll be their fault, not mine. McCants could have gone to class and taken his education seriously, but he didn't. He allowed himself to live down to the role of black male college athletes as centralized in academic misconduct scandals that serve to further pathologize them on campus and in society. What does it mean that the faces of wrongdoing in a college space are masculine and black, not the white coaches or administrators who perpetuated it? What is at stake if black athletes are stereotyped as being lazy and uninterested in learning? When black men are already assumed to have a proclivity for criminal activity and stupidity, their presence on college campuses can be a form of resistance against those very stereotypes. We've forgotten. Educating black people is a revolutionary act. Whereas the teaching of slaves to read and write has a tendency to excite dissatisfaction in their minds and to produce insurrection and rebellion to the manifest injury of the citizens of this state, therefore be it enacted by the General Assembly of the State of North Carolina that any free person who shall hereafter teach or attempt to teach any slave within this state to read or write shall be liable to indictment in any court of record in the state having jurisdiction thereof, and upon conviction shall at the discretion of the court, if a white man or woman be fined not less than $100 nor more than $200 or imprisoned, and if a free person of color shall be whipped at the discretion of the court, not exceeding 39 lashes nor less than 20 lashes. Be it further enacted that if any slave shall hereafter teach or attempt to teach any other slave to read or write, he or she may be carried before any justice of the peace, and on conviction thereof shall be sentenced to receive 39 lashes on his or her bare back. That was a law in 1830 in North Carolina. This is 2017. Black men need no longer be fearful of emancipating their intelligence. Athletic departments and programs are, have been, and should be held accountable for academic misconduct when there is evidence to do so. But black athletes are the poster boys for these situations. Black male athletes. They owe it to their grandparents, mothers, fathers, guardians, to progeny to come, to themselves, to be measured by the rest of society by something other than their 40-yard time or vertical leap. They shouldn't choose where they will go to college based on that college appearing to be a launching pad to a professional athletic career. Only 2% of them will be so lucky to get paid in the NFL or the NBA for their athletic ability. Instead, they should choose where to matriculate based on the graduation rate for black athletes at whatever school. Choose it based on what those black athletes who graduated and didn't make it to the pros are doing now. Choose it based on whether the coach will support their desire to study abroad one semester or summer, just like about every other college student, rather than having to put in every spare hour in the weight room. Choose it based on whether they can take afternoon lab classes instead of attend yet another team meeting. Choose it based on whether they can accept an internship, which is probably the most important prep work you can do in college if you expect to cash in on your newly minted college degree immediately upon graduating or shortly thereafter. Choose it based on whether you can take advantage of all the things the college experience has to offer, from being active in student government, theater, or even community service groups that spend spring breaks building water wells in third world countries. But it's not just on them, it's on us, their parents, too. We owe it to them to see them as more than just a get out of college debt opportunity, simply because they can win an athletic scholarship, which, by the way, as you all know, is still, on most college campuses, a one-year renewable contract given by the athletic department, not the academy, and can be taken away in a whim, or when some new hotshot from high school is seen as better to the coaches than you. Parents and adults in black communities need to shower black males with as much praise for the development of their intellect as for the improvement in their bench press or squat. We need not forget, as a friend of mine wrote on the cover of his book, that your brain is a muscle too. We need to emphasize that so that black men can change how they are perceived in the world, which continues to be by masculinity, physical prowess, a reality that has made your space in life, be it Ferguson, Missouri, Cincinnati, Ohio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, New York City, Cleveland, Sanford, Florida, a dangerous one in which to grow up, survive, and prosper. Thank you. And I'll take any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
This is one of the reasons why I'm back here in school, working with black athletes, mostly black kids my entire life since I was 17 years old. How do we start to change that culture within their community? So I've been in those communities, but how do you fight against them? Where they're just kind of being taught how to game the system in a certain way. How do we teach them how to game the system to get educated like you're talking about?
I mean, I think we just have to change the mindset. Like I said, I feel like I'm part of the problem because I love college sports. I've already blocked out the first week of March Madness, not because I want to cover March Madness, but because there's a possibility that Northwestern will finally break through, right, and get in. I'm like, I don't care where they're at, I'm going. So I promote, I'm part of that problem. But it needs to be understood that when we talk about the problems facing college sports, we have these discussions about paying or not. We have discussions about health care or not. We have discussions about whether scholarships should be one-year renewable deals or 4 or 5 year deals that guarantee someone a real opportunity to get their education. That this is by and large a black male problem. When I see college athletics, the image I get, and I have lots of friends in college athletics, black and white, coaches, athletic directors, whatever. But I see like a gerbil on a wheel, right? And that gerbil is the black male. And he is creating all this revenue for college sports that pay for sports that we don't play, golf, swimming, gymnastics, rowing, whatever, right? Because there are 2 types of sports on campus. There are revenue generating sports, right? And there are expenditure sports. And black male athletes play the revenue generating sports. And so they have to understand their political and economic power within that framework. And much more can be demanded from the academy as well as the athletic department than I think people are demanding right now. And so it's a generational educational challenge. And in Missouri, we saw people kind of understand that. At Grambling, we saw some understanding of it. Slowly but surely, it's happening with some of the lawsuits that people have come to an understanding after they've gotten out of school. The unionization effort at Northwestern that failed, but failed largely because of a ruling that the National Labor Relations Board has since overturned. And that was a ruling involving Brown University challenge in 1999, somebody may know, correct me if I'm wrong, where graduate students sued for the right to be recognized as university employees. They were turned down, but the National Labor Relations Board recently revisited that and said, no, that wasn't right, and that, in fact, graduate students should be viewed, if they do research and teaching, should be viewed as employees. So it seemed to me that that can also be applied to athletes who generate revenue for the corporation of higher ed. Yes, sir.
I believe ESPN did a documentary, School of Private College Sports. I know it's a really big documentary it's about paying athletes, but they interviewed many athletes coming out, and they basically looked at the athlete as like indentured servitude, but the actual dictionary definition is what the athlete is in today's system. I didn't know if you worked on that or if you had an opinion.
I didn't work on that, but that's, it's not a new concept. Jonas Serra from the New York Times just wrote a book last year. It may have been called Indentured Servitude, the college athlete or something like that. But not a new observation or comparison. And I think it holds true. I mean, I get so frustrated when I hear people say, oh, but he or she got a free education. If I give you a $20 bill right now and say, have a good day, that's free money. But if I tell you to do 20 leaps onto this desk for your $20, you did work. It's not free. And that's the experience of the college athlete, scholarship athlete. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How, big of an impact do you think the media has in, perpetuating this idea?
Huge. Oh, we've been completely complicit. Walter Byers, as I just reminded you, go read the book. I mean, it's like a confession. He created the term that we in the media regurgitated called student athlete, specifically to protect the NCAA and member institutions from lawsuits saying that they are in fact employees and you therefore owe them what you owe the rest of your employees, health care, a wage, all of that. So yeah, we've absolutely been complicit in this. The media, we're complicit in so many things. I hate when we in the media swallow words that are fed to us from people with a certain agenda, and then we just regurgitate it without understanding what it is we're parroting. I could give you some examples from the political season, but yeah, we've absolutely been complicit. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so how do you feel about student athletes who get a once-in-a-chance opportunity to go pro and they leave school, and then?
What's your major?
I'm a journalism major.
You're a journalism major, great. Broadcast, print, multi-platform?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Multi-platform? So, and your first name is?
Kelsey.
Kelsey,
Yes.
good to meet you. What year are you in?
I'm a senior. I graduated.
You're a senior? Okay. So if 2 years ago, ESPN had called you and said, Kelsey, we love your work. You know what? You should come work for us right now. We'll pay you $125,000 a year. What would you do? Would you go or you stay in school?
I probably would have went.
But suppose the communications school, suppose you went in to talk to Professor Billings and he said, well, we have a rule. You can't do that. You have to stay here another year. How would you feel? Confused. I mean, it's constraining. I think the whole point to be in college is to, the romantic reason is, so you can discuss big issues and find answers to them in different ways, and all of that. But the bottom line is we're in a capitalist society, and the reason you're in the bottom line, the reason you're in college, is to get skills so that in a few years you can work and be a productive tax-paying member of society. So I think it's wholly unfair that labor be constrained on campus simply because it's athletic labor. And then you get into the fact that, different sports have different rules about that. So I'll just remind you of one when LeBron James and Maurice Clarett, who was a football player in Ohio, around the same time LeBron was a high school player. I think they were separated by maybe a year, maybe two. Maurice Clarett watched LeBron James turn pro out of high school and sign a multi-million-dollar contract. And Maurice Clarett was one of the best high school running backs in the country, and he wondered, why can't I do that? Why should I be constrained? Whatever the excuse, physical, whatever, I should be given the same opportunity as my boy LeBron. And he wasn't, because the NFL and college football have an arrangement that prevented him from being able to do that. And so, I think I just think that's wholly unfair. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was curious to see what you thought about an idea of, obviously a solution to this issue is going to be multifaceted from lots of different angles. But since these sports are they're a big revenue generation, as we talked about, what do you think about the idea of disrupting the revenue producing aspect of the sport? So, for example, if students were to organize and say, we're not going to buy our student season tickets to the football or basketball games, and kind of disrupt that revenue stream, is that something that's been tried before? Can you think about that?
I don't know about the disruption of the revenue stream. I don't have a problem with the revenue stream, other than the fact that there is absolutely no trickle of that. Well, I shouldn't say absolutely. There seems to be an equitable sharing of that revenue stream at this point. Before, when colleges there weren't these gargantuan broadcast contracts, and they weren't making tens upon tens upon tens upon millions of dollars, then I think the argument was different. But I remember being at a meeting of the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics, and Charles Young was there, and Charles Young he's a Chancellor Emeritus, I think, of Florida and UCLA and some other school, and he told the rest of the people sitting around, these are people who are presidents of universities, former presidents, athletic directors, players, and they were discussing this. All this was on their table, and he said the problem is the money. We're taking in so much money. Coaches are making so much money. This is now a moral problem for us. I mentioned in a column recently after the national championship game, and I'm not picking on Dabo Swinney, but I was just looking at the bonuses that he got in the postseason. He made somewhere between $750,000, maybe $1 million in bonuses for winning the national championship, playing in the national championship, winning a semifinal game, playing in a semifinal game, and finishing in the top 5. And what does players get? Attaboy, way to get him. Here's a cool cap. Here's a little swag bag, got a t-shirt in it, a couple $100 worth of goodies, because the NCAA says this is an amateur sport. So we have to cap what we can give you at, I don't know what it is this year, $500, $600 worth of stuff. But you got memories, baby. You're national champion.
So you said, suggest 2 ways in which the black athletes are being taken advantage of. One, as it were, financially, by being given nothing financial compensation for their labor. The other, education, by being hamstrung in their abilities to take advantage of these opportunities. I worry that resolving those 2 inequities actually trade off against one another, and that sorting one out is going to hurt the other. So, for instance, if we start paying student athletes and recognize them as being professionals, isn't it going to be sort of a natural response to say, well, now that you're professionals, You're no longer students, and your educational opportunities are going to be diminished as should accord any professional. I'm a professional professor. I don't have
Right.
the university gives me opportunities to take some class, but I can't be a full-time student anymore.
I've thought about that. And anybody in here in medical school on the med track? You know? Because if you are, I don't know, where's the University of Alabama Medical School? Is it on campus or is it in Birmingham or UAB? Okay. So I assume that there is what they call there a teaching hospital, right? People who are, now they are grad students studying to become doctors in a teaching environment that is a real life environment, and they are being paid a salary as they pursue their degree. I don't understand why that model cannot be used for revenue generating college sports. Why can you not be paid generating all this money while you are pursuing academic work? I'll also give you another example. A few years ago, there was a cool little story in the New York area about the oldest graduate that particular year at Columbia University. And the guy was like, I don't know, he was like 60 years old or something like that. And he was a refugee from one of the Eastern European wars. I can't remember which one. But at any rate, he landed in New York somehow. He's going through the newspaper, and he saw an ad for someone in the maintenance department, a maintenance job at Columbia University. And it also said, you know, and if you take this job, you know, you can get tuition remission to pursue a degree. This guy sounds like a pretty good deal. So he went to Columbia, worked nights, or I can't remember, whenever you worked, 5 days a week, cleaning up, got a little salary, used his tuition remission, and I forget how long it took him, but however long it took him, he got his degree. All right? So here was an opportunity for him to be a student and to work, to make a living, and to get his degree. Again, I don't see why that can't be done in college sports. Why can't a star, or why can't a player for a revenue generating team, if he or she does not want to, and some women's sports do generate revenue, basketball, some places, you know, why can't they have that sort of an arrangement where they're being remunerated in hard cash for their athletic ability, and then they can pursue a degree if they want at the speed that they choose. Because the other thing that happens here is, you know, big time college athletics also makes a mockery of higher education. All right? When you see what happened to the African American Studies Department at North Carolina, that's on them, by the way. But how could they lower themselves to be complicit in something like that? Especially given how long and hard black professors and professors of African American studies fought to legitimize that discipline. I have no patience for those people. So. Yes.
Kevin, I think you know I'm with you on most of this here. I just want to play devil's advocate for a second. Sometimes we'll hear, okay, it's not just the free education. It is trickling down to the athletes. It's just not in the manner that they want. What we hear there is expertise from the coaches. I mean, we've got a lot of coaches.
Right.
They're staying in college because they can't afford the pay cut to go to the pros. That's where we're at. I mean, they're talking about getting their pay cut in half. And there's also facilities. So, you know, you take, you know, the strength and training facilities
Right.
here, and then when they go to the NFL or the NBA, they can't believe this is what the pros look like, because this is where the premium facilities and instruction is. So is there a value that's placed? Is that an argument for having that trickle down to the
There's no question that there's value. I mean, I've seen facilities at Penn State, Texas, Oklahoma, trying to think of some other places that are just unbelievable. But again, those things aren't just built overnight and with free labor, except for the labor of the successful team and the athletes on it. So I don't think there's no question about that. But basically, what that says is that college sports are serving, and we've heard this before, and it's true, are serving as a minor league particularly for the NFL. And at some point, that really needs to be realized. And if, in fact, you're a minor league, then you need to treat the athletes as if they are minor league players. They need, and you know, I'll just go back to something else. The Northwestern University struggle, which really was spearheaded by Ramoga Huma, who's been fighting at this since he was a defensive back at UCLA in the 90s. And he's been organizing college athletes for years. Really was never about pay. It wasn't about pay. It was really just about being treated fairly. You know, it's not when you get to the NFL that you get CTE, right? It's when you're in college. So shouldn't you be able to get some long-term health care from the college football team you play for? Because of what you know is coming down the line. I was in the University of Maryland football house one day for, I don't even know what the reason was. Oh, I know. I went to return a helmet return some pads that I borrowed to wear on TV to make myself look like Richard Sherman. That's what it was. And so I'm sitting in the lobby and I'm talking to the athletic director I've known for years, Kevin Anderson, and another guy on the coaching staff. We were just chewing the fat. And a kid came down the hallway into the foyer, and he was on crutches. And Kevin Anderson went over to him and said, "Hey, how you doing? How's the rehab going?" And the guy said, "Oh, it's going fine." He said, "You know, this is my third time through, and this time they took the tendon from." Oh, he said, and this time they used a cadaver tendon to repair my whatever it was he tore. Three surgeries in college, which is, forget about lost playing time. That's lost class time. That's going through a lot. Maybe leading to loss of a scholarship. So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into this. There's no question that the facilities and the coaching and the exposure on national television is something that can't be found anywhere else for someone who's not of NFL professional age. But that is just a reminder to me that it's really a minor league, and it needs to be treated as such. Yes, sir.
So, if change happens, what are the metrics for success? What do we measure? I mean, is it comparable graduation rates? Is it some sort of equitable revenue share? What are the numbers you would look at 10 years from now that said we've made change and this
Right.
is what it looks like?
Well, one would be graduation rates. Arne Duncan, who last year left after several years as Obama's Secretary of Education, and who played basketball at Harvard, I believe. I had this conversation with him a year or so ago, and his big thing is it's got to be education. And the metrics that he points to is the fact that is the impact that a college degree has on one's earning ability as an adult versus not having a college degree. And so, you know, he has been adamant about that with the NCAA, and he's one of the ones who pushed through the rule to have college athletic departments have to meet certain academic thresholds, and they are encouraged to do so with monetary rewards. And a lot of people said the NCAA would never agree to that, but somehow he convinced enough people to get that done. So that's certainly, I think graduation rate is certainly one part. And then the other part is, I think, to take care of these athletes. I keep going back to is just if they're bringing in, well, not if, they are bringing in so much money, and they are, particularly in football, the deleterious effects on the body and, as we know now, the brain are such that, there needs to be greater insurance. I forget has the SEC gone to guaranteed scholarships? I forget. I know the Big Ten has. The SEC has. They can afford it. That's why they can afford it. Every time you push college athletics on something like this, you know what? They come up with it somehow under the couch. They find a couple more $1,000 to pay somebody or to get something done. As soon as another discussion came up about paying players, Mark Emmert showed up at a night commission meeting and he said, "You know what? Why don't we give an extra $2,000 to everybody?" Even though he knew it couldn't be done because of the way he proposed it, but all of a sudden he found more money. The other year, the NCAA said, "Oh, look, we found a couple quarters down here on the floor, so we're going to give every player's family airfare to go see them play in a championship game." They always find money. You can't walk around the NCAA and not bump into a boatload of money. So they can find a way. So there are different ways to get this done. Yep.
First thing I want to say is I'm a big fan of you.
Thanks.
I love you around the horn.
Cool.
I was at the gym actually, and my friend texted me, so that's why I smell bad in a mess like this.
Sure. Okay.
And,
Right. All right. I know. Yeah.
And the question is, this issue's been around for a while. I remember, as a kid, the Northwestern thing and hearing about Brown's unionization, and it just seems like it's stuck. Is there any progress being made?
No, I think progress is being made. I mean, you look at all the legal challenges to this arrangement just in the last few years. EA Sports settled on the rights to athletes' images. You've got the O'Bannon case. Much of that, which so far has been a victory for players. Even the unionization effort at Northwestern, I don't see the fact that was ultimately rejected as a lack of progress. I see that as progress because it's really the first time we've had to get that far. I think the public's sensibilities to this are much greater now. I think you asked about the media's role in all this. I think the media now is much wiser when writing and reporting about this. I think there's a lot of sentiment out there right now for things to change, and I think the progress is being made. It's slow. I mean, you've got some coaches saying, "You know what, we do need to give them a few more dollars." Dabo Swinney doesn't see it that way. But there are a lot more coaches who feel that way now than I think ever before.